At my graduation party, I watched my dad whisper something into my mom's ear. Her face went pale, and my older sister quietly slipped away. That was the moment I realized everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. And what I exposed that night, it destroyed us. Stay with me as I take you through exactly what happened, because the story you're about to hear isn't just shocking. It's a lesson in trust, family, and truth. I had been dreaming about this day for years. All the late nights studying, the sacrifices, and the constant balancing between school and helping out at home were finally paying off. My name is Amara Delane Okoye, and this was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. The party was buzzing with my friends, neighbors, and relatives. I was smiling, taking pictures, and soaking it all in, but something felt off. I noticed my dad, Reginald Okoye, standing near the corner of the living room, his face unusually tense. He wasn't joking with anyone or laughing at the little things like he normally did. My mom, Selena Okoye, tried to keep the energy light, but I saw her glance toward Dad with a nervous flicker in her eyes. Then it happened. Dad leaned in close, whispered something in Mom's ear, and I saw her freeze. Her hands trembled slightly, and she looked almost frightened. Before I could even process it, my sister, Zaria, quietly slipped out of the room. She didn't say a word, just disappeared into the night like a shadow. My heart raced. I had never seen her act like this before. Something serious was going on, and I couldn't just ignore it. I needed to know what was happening. I followed her into the backyard, keeping my distance, and found her sitting on the steps, hugging her knees. She was crying softly, but when I approached, she shook her head and whispered, "Amara, please not tonight. Just let it go." Her voice cracked, and I felt a pang of frustration and worry. I couldn't just let it go. I had to know the truth. I crept closer to the back door and overheard my parents inside, their voices low but sharp. "Tonight she deserves to know," Mom said, her voice shaking. Dad's tone was firm, but there was fear hidden behind it. They were arguing about something serious, something that clearly involved me, though I had no idea what it was yet. The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. A betrayal was coming. I could feel it, a heavy, invisible weight pressing on my chest, but I didn't know I was at the center of it. My mind raced with questions. What could they be hiding from me? Why was Zaria crying? Why were my parents so tense, so scared? I took a deep breath, bracing myself for whatever truth was waiting. I knew my life was about to change in ways I couldn't yet imagine. That night marked the beginning of a journey where nothing would ever feel the same again, and I had no choice but to face the reality my family had kept from me for years. I followed Zaria into the backyard, my heart pounding in my chest. She was sitting behind the garage, hunched over, her shoulders shaking as silent tears rolled down her cheeks. I knelt beside her, unsure what to say. "Zaria, what's wrong?" I asked gently. She shook her head and whispered, "Amara, please not tonight. Just don't ask questions." Her voice trembled, and I realized she was carrying a burden she wasn't ready to share. But I couldn't let it go. I could feel that something serious was unfolding, something that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. When I went back inside, the air felt heavy with tension. I confronted my parents, trying to get some clarity. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. My dad, Reginald, immediately tried to brush me off with a nervous laugh. "It's nothing, Amara, just a family disagreement. Don't worry about it." But my mom, Selena, couldn't hide the strain any longer. Her lips trembled, and she took a deep breath, glancing toward the door like she was about to say something important, but couldn't find the words. Her emotional breakdown made my stomach twist. I could see that they were hiding something they didn't want me to know, but it was clear that it involved me. Before I could press further, the doorbell rang, cutting through the tense atmosphere. A man stood there, someone I had never seen before, but the way my parents reacted spoke volumes. They froze, exchanging worried glances. The stranger stepped inside confidently, as though he belonged there. "I need to speak with Amara," he said calmly, his eyes locking onto me. "I'm connected to her past. I think it's time she knew the truth." I felt a mix of fear and curiosity surge through me. My parents exchanged another look, silently pleading with each other, before my dad finally muttered, Maybe this is the right time." I stared at them, demanding answers. "Who is he? What do you mean he's connected to me?" But neither of them gave me a straight response. My mom's hands shook as she tried to speak, but her voice caught. My dad averted his eyes, clearly uncomfortable. The stranger's presence changed everything. He had a quiet authority, a calm intensity that made it impossible to ignore what he was implying. I could feel the seeds of betrayal starting to take root. Something about my family had been hidden from me, and this man's arrival meant that the truth could no longer be postponed. I realized then that the perfect image of my life, the loving parents, the protective older sister, was crumbling before my eyes. I was standing at the edge of a revelation that would shake my world, and for the first time, I understood that nothing would ever be the same again. I took a deep breath, bracing myself, knowing that whatever came next, I had to face it head-on. The walls my family had built around their secrets were starting to crack, and I was about to see everything they had tried so hard to hide. That night, the truth hit me like a freight train. My dad, Reginald, finally spoke, and the words made my world spin. He admitted that he had hidden a huge secret about my biological background, something that changed everything I thought I knew about myself. My legs felt weak, and my chest tightened as I tried to process what he was saying. The father I had trusted my whole life had kept a secret that went to the very core of who I was. Zaria, my sister, stepped forward, her eyes filled with guilt and tears. "Amara, I've known for years," she whispered. "I promised I wouldn't tell. I couldn't go against Mom and Dad." Her voice broke as she admitted the secret she had been carrying all these years. It felt like another stab to the heart. She had been my ally, my sister, and yet she had been sworn to protect a lie that wasn't hers to keep. Then Mom, Selena, finally crumbled. She sank into the chair, covering her face, and admitted her role in the deception. "I thought I was protecting you, Amara. I thought it was the right thing." Her words tumbled out in a mix of regret and desperation, but they couldn't fix the fracture they had caused. The truth she revealed made me feel like my entire childhood had been built on lies, like nothing I had believed about my family was real. The stranger stepped closer, calm but firm. "Amara," he said, "I'm here because of you. Your birth, your very beginning, is connected to me." He laid out details that tied him directly to my past, facts I had never known, people I had never met, events my parents had hidden. The story he told made me feel betrayed, stunned, and hollow all at once. I couldn't breathe. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had imagined. Every memory, every smile, every lesson from my parents now felt tainted. I realized I had been living in a carefully constructed illusion, and the people I had loved most had participated in it. Trust, the thing I had always taken for granted, felt like it had been ripped from my hands. I couldn't stay there. I stormed out of the house, the cold night air hitting my face as if trying to wake me from a nightmare. Everything I thought I knew about myself collapsed. Who was I if my entire family had been lying to me? What part of my life had been real? Inside, the family began to splinter. My parents argued quietly, their voices sharp and defensive. Zaria stood awkwardly between them, unsure of where she belonged. The house that had once felt safe now seemed alien, a battlefield of fractured loyalty and raw emotion. And as I walked into the dark streets, a determination burned inside me. I couldn't let this end here. I needed to know the full story, no matter how painful, no matter how much it hurt. I had to understand the truth behind the lies. I had to reclaim my life from the deception that had shaped it. That night, I made a silent promise. I would uncover everything, and I would not let this betrayal define me. After the shocking revelations that night, I knew I couldn't stop at just one confession. I had to dig deeper. I started by reaching out to extended family members, uncles, aunts, cousins, anyone who might know pieces of my past. Each conversation felt like peeling back another layer of a complicated puzzle. Some remembered events differently than others, some seemed nervous, like they were afraid of saying too much, but every answer added to the growing picture of what my parents had hidden from me. One afternoon, while visiting my Aunt Ifioma, she paused mid-sentence and said, almost accidentally, "Your family, they've covered up things before. Always for the sake of appearances, to maintain status." Her words struck me like lightning. Cover-ups? Status? What could be so important that my parents, the people I trusted most, would go to such lengths to hide it from me? I pressed for more, but she looked uneasy, avoiding my gaze. Even so, the seed of doubt and suspicion grew stronger. As I pieced together conversations, I discovered something that shook me even more. I had been at the center of a bitter conflict years ago, something that had nothing to do with my actions, but everything to do with my parents' hidden lives. It was as if my very existence had been tangled in secrets, arguments, and manipulations I couldn't even imagine. Every story I heard seemed to contradict another. Names were wrong, dates didn't match, Events were remembered differently depending on who I asked. The confusion was overwhelming, but it was also proof. Proof that the narrative my parents had given me was carefully controlled and incomplete. Zarya noticed how obsessed I was becoming with uncovering the truth. One evening, she pulled me aside, her voice almost desperate. "Amara, please just stop digging. Some things are better left alone," she pleaded. I shook my head. I couldn't stop. Not now. I had already glimpsed the truth. Turning back would only leave me trapped in lies and half-truths. I had to know everything, no matter the cost. Determined to find tangible evidence, I returned home and went straight to the attic. Dust coated the wooden beams, and the air was thick with the smell of old paper and memories. After hours of searching, I discovered old documents, letters, photographs, legal papers, that my parents had clearly tried to hide. As I compared these documents to the story my parents had told me, the contradictions were staggering. Dates didn't match, names were missing, events had been rewritten. Every paper I uncovered added another layer to the betrayal I had already felt so deeply. By the time I sat down, surrounded by papers and photographs, the full weight of it hit me. The depth of my family's deception was undeniable. This wasn't a mistake, an oversight, or a small lie to protect me. It was a carefully maintained facade, one that had shaped my entire life without my knowledge. I felt a mix of anger, sorrow, and determination surge through me. I had uncovered enough to know the truth couldn't be ignored any longer. The next step would be confronting them, but first, I needed to gather every piece of evidence to face the reality my family had tried so hard to hide. I walked into the living room, clutching the stack of documents I had uncovered in the attic. My hands shook, but my resolve was stronger than my fear. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm. I laid the papers on the table between us. "I need the truth. Everything." The silence that followed was deafening. My dad, Reginald, finally broke the quiet. For the first time in years, he looked vulnerable. "Amara, I never wanted you to find out like this," he said, his voice low. He began to tell his side of the story, how certain events had forced him to make decisions he thought were best for me, how he tried to protect me from a truth he believed I couldn't handle. But even as he spoke, I could see the gaps, the parts that didn't align with the evidence I held in my hands. Then my mom, Selena, spoke. Her voice was shaky, emotional, carrying years of guilt. She explained her version, her fears, her regrets, and the decisions she had made alongside Dad. But as she spoke, I realized her story didn't match Dad's. The contradictions were impossible to ignore. Names were different, timelines didn't add up, and motivations clashed. I could see that both of them had built their own versions of reality to justify the deception. Zarya stepped forward, her eyes wide with anxiety. "Amara, there's something I haven't told either of them," she said. My heart pounded. Years ago, when this all started, I knew the truth, and I stayed silent. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I was just part of the lie. Her words cut through the tension, adding another layer of betrayal I hadn't expected. Even my sister, who I had trusted, had been keeping pieces of the truth from me. The stranger, calm and composed, stepped forward with documents and proof that neither of my parents could deny. Every paper, every signature, every note tied directly to the events surrounding my birth and upbringing. His evidence left no room for excuses or deflection. I could feel the full story coming together, a mosaic of lies and secrets that had been intentionally hidden from me all these years. It became clear, the betrayal had been deliberate. My parents hadn't made mistakes. They had made choices to manipulate my life, to control what I knew, and to shape my childhood according to their needs. Every memory I had, every lesson, every promise felt tainted. I realized my entire childhood had been carefully constructed around a lie, one that had defined who I was and how I viewed the world. For a moment, I felt paralyzed by anger and grief. But then, a sense of clarity washed over me. I was done being silent. I wasn't going to let their manipulation continue to control my life. Holding the documents, looking at my family, I made a silent vow. I would speak, I would uncover every detail, and I would take back the story of my own life. No longer would I be a bystander to the lies that had shaped me. This was the beginning of reclaiming my truth. I packed a small bag and left my family home that evening. The house that had once felt safe now felt suffocating, full of unspoken accusations and lingering lies. I needed space to breathe, to think, to protect my peace. Staying there any longer would only drag me back into their drama, and I couldn't let that happen. Moving out, even temporarily, felt like the first step toward reclaiming myself. Back at home, the tension was unbearable. My parents, once a united front, turned on each other with furious intensity. Dad blamed Mom for keeping me in the dark, for manipulating the truth in ways he couldn't forgive. Mom, in turn, lashed out, insisting she had only done what she thought was best, refusing to acknowledge the damage she had caused. Their arguments echoed through the halls, each accusation sharper than the last. The house, once a place of warmth, had become a battlefield. Zarya reached out, trying to bridge the gap. She begged me to forgive her, explaining that she had been trapped between loyalty to our parents and protecting me. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, tears in her eyes. But I couldn't forgive her yet. The pain ran too deep, and the trust that had once existed between us was fractured. I nodded silently, knowing that reconciliation would take time, and that right now, I had to focus on myself. In my time away from home, I found comfort in my best friend, Nayla Brookshire. She became my anchor, listening to me as I poured out everything, the lies, the deception, the betrayal that had upended my life. Nayla didn't judge or offer empty advice. She simply reminded me that I wasn't alone, that I had a right to be angry, hurt, and cautious. Her support gave me strength to stand firm in my decisions. To process everything fully, I began therapy. Sitting with a professional allowed me to untangle the complicated mix of emotions that had been swirling inside me for weeks. Anger, grief, confusion, and shame. All of it found a place in the sessions. Through this, I began to understand that my parents' actions, while deeply hurtful, didn't define my worth. I could separate myself from their choices and start rebuilding my own sense of self. Meanwhile, my father began to spiral. I could see the guilt etched into his face whenever I spoke to him, the fear that he might lose me permanently. It was a desperate, almost painful transformation. Someone I had always seen as confident and unshakable now seemed lost. Mom, on the other hand, grew defensive, resentful, and unwilling to take responsibility. Every attempt I made to discuss the situation with her ended in shouting or silence. The tipping point came during a family confrontation. Emotions ran high, accusations flew, and I realized that remaining involved would only keep me trapped in their chaos. With a heavy heart but a clear mind, I made the hardest decision yet. I cut ties, at least temporarily, from the people who had caused me so much pain. I knew it was necessary to protect my well-being and give myself the chance to heal, even if it meant leaving behind the family I had once trusted completely. After cutting ties with my parents, I focused on rebuilding my life from the ground up. I found a small apartment on my own and started a job that allowed me to support myself. Every paycheck, every decision about my new space, every boundary I set with people in my life felt like a small victory. For the first time, I was in control. I wasn't running from my past. I was creating a future that belonged entirely to me. One weekend, I met with my maternal cousin, Aisha, who had always been on the periphery of our family. Over coffee, she shared things I had never known about my parents' behavior, patterns of secrecy, and manipulations that had affected not just me, but several generations before me. "This isn't just about you, Amara," she said softly. "These patterns have been repeating for decades." I felt a chill run down my spine. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was inherited, like a shadow passed down through generations. Learning this only strengthened my resolve. I refused to let this cycle continue with me. I vowed that whatever had been hidden, whatever lies had been told, I would confront it and break the chain. I wanted honesty and accountability in my life, not secrets and manipulation. Nayla continued to be my rock during this time. She reminded me constantly that facing the past required courage, not fear. "You can do this," she said. "Not for them, but for yourself. Show them you're stronger than the lies they've built around you." Her words echoed in my mind as I made a plan. I wasn't going to react blindly. I was going to prepare, gather evidence, and make sure my voice was heard clearly. I started collecting every scrap of proof I could find: documents, letters, photos, and testimonies from family members who were willing to speak honestly. Each piece I added strengthened my case and clarified the timeline of deception. Slowly, I began to see the full picture, not just of my own betrayal, but of the patterns of secrecy that had defined my family for years. As I prepared, I noticed that family members were starting to take sides. Some, shocked by what they learned, quietly aligned with me. Others, loyal to my parents, distanced themselves or refused to acknowledge the truth. I realized this confrontation would be as much about clarity and justice as it was about reshaping relationships. With everything in place, I began planning a controlled confrontation. I wanted it to be public enough that the truth couldn't be ignored, but measured enough that I could stay calm and focused. This wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability and closure. I envisioned a gathering where I could present the evidence, speak my truth, and make sure that the story of my life would no longer be dictated by the lies of others. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose beyond anger or hurt. I was taking back control, reclaiming my identity, and preparing to face my family with confidence. The next step was clear. I would confront the past head-on, and this time, I would not back down. I sent out the invitations weeks in advance, careful with every word. It was framed as a healing dinner, a chance for family to come together, but I knew it would be so much more than that. The table was set, candles flickering softly, and the air was thick with anticipation. When the first relatives arrived, I could feel the tension rising with every handshake, every polite smile. Everyone knew something was different tonight. As the last guest stepped through the door, I brought in the stranger, the one who had helped me piece together the truth. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere. Whispers ran through the room, and my parents' faces tightened. They had known this night was coming, but having a witness, someone who could verify the full story, made them uneasy. I looked around at the faces of my aunts, uncles, cousins, and even my sister Zaria, and took a deep breath. I invited you all here because it's time you know the truth, I began, my voice steady. I explained everything, the lies my parents had told, the manipulations, the secrets that had shaped my life without my consent. I spoke calmly, refusing to let emotion shake me, even as my chest tightened with every word. I could see people leaning in, absorbing every detail. Then I presented the evidence. Documents, letters, photographs, and testimonies from those who had been affected or had knowledge of the situation. Each paper, each statement, confirmed what I had been saying. I could see the reactions around the room: shock, disbelief, and slowly anger. The relatives started turning on my parents, questioning why they had maintained this deception for so long, why they had kept their own child in the dark. My father tried to speak, attempting to justify his actions. I only did what I thought was best for her, he said, his voice defensive but faltering. But no one believed him. The stories he told were inconsistent with the evidence laid out on the table, and his attempts at explanation sounded hollow, even to him. My mother's composure broke completely. Tears streamed down her face as she finally confessed, admitting to her role in the long-standing deception. She spoke quickly, her words tumbling out in a mix of guilt and regret, finally owning up to the manipulation that had defined our family for so many years. The room was silent, heavy with the weight of the truth. Everyone watched as the carefully constructed image of our family shattered before their eyes. Parents who had once seemed untouchable were now exposed, their control over the narrative gone. Conversations turned to whispered discussions, some expressing relief at finally knowing, others angry at the betrayal they had unknowingly supported by silence. I sat back, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. The exposure was complete. The family facade had crumbled, the lies were laid bare, and for the first time, the truth was mine. No one could deny it, no one could twist it. Tonight wasn't just a confrontation, it was a reckoning, and I had finally reclaimed my voice in a family that had tried to silence it for far too long. After the exposure dinner, I realized that the story wouldn't fix itself. I refused to let my parents manipulate the narrative anymore. I had lived too long in the shadows of their lies, and I wasn't going to let them twist the truth to make themselves look better. Every conversation, every attempt at reconciliation, had to go on my terms. I was determined to take control of my own story, to ensure the truth could no longer be hidden or distorted. The first step was cutting ties. I severed both financial and emotional connections with my parents. I had worked hard to become independent, and now I could stand firmly on my own. I blocked their access to my accounts, ended any shared responsibilities, and made it clear that their opinions could no longer influence my life. It was painful but necessary. I had to create boundaries strong enough to protect my peace and prevent further manipulation. Zaria approached me one last time. Her eyes were full of remorse, and she tried to explain herself, to offer her own side of the story. Amara, I was trapped. I didn't want to hurt you, but I was caught between them and you, she said, her voice breaking. I listened, finally allowing myself to understand her role. I realized she had been a part of the betrayal, yes, but also a victim of our parents' control. Understanding this didn't erase the pain, but it gave me clarity. I could see why she had acted as she did and why it had hurt me so deeply. Next, I demanded accountability from my parents individually. I didn't allow them to hide behind each other's excuses or manipulate me with collective guilt. I addressed Dad first, confronting him with every detail, every document, and every witness who could confirm his deception. The consequences were immediate. His professional reputation suffered when colleagues and business partners learned of the deceit and manipulation. The fallout was tangible. He couldn't undo the damage, and he had no one to blame but himself. Mom, on the other hand, tried to frame me as ungrateful, painting me as someone who was attacking the family she had sacrificed for. But no one believed her anymore. The evidence was clear, and the extended family had already seen the truth. Her words fell flat, unconvincing against the reality of her actions and the careful documentation I had presented. Through it all, I focused on myself. I chose my own growth, my own peace, and my own future over their guilt and manipulations. I realized that forgiveness didn't have to come immediately, and loyalty didn't mean ignoring betrayal. I had the power to define my life, separate from the people who had tried to control it. For the first time, I felt fully free. I had reclaimed my story, demanded accountability, and drawn the boundaries necessary to protect myself. The lies no longer had power over me, and the weight of the betrayal no longer defined my worth. I had chosen myself, my truth, and my independence, and nothing could take that away. I decided to visit the stranger one last time, the man who had helped me piece together the truth about my past. Sitting across from him, I asked every question I had, wanting to understand my full identity. He answered patiently, filling in gaps I didn't even know existed, explaining connections, events, and decisions that had shaped my early life. As he spoke, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Finally, I knew the complete story, not just fragments or secrets, but the full picture of who I was and why certain choices had been made around me. Leaving his house that day, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't known in years. I accepted the truth on my own terms. I didn't need anyone else to tell me what to feel or how to react. I could acknowledge the pain, the betrayal, and the lies, but I could also choose how they would shape my future. The past was mine to understand, not to be controlled by. With this clarity, I committed to rebuilding my life with honesty at its center. I created routines that reflected my values, built relationships that were transparent, and ensured that my personal boundaries were respected. Every choice I made, career decisions, friendships, living arrangements, was guided by a need for authenticity. I realized that my peace depended on keeping lies and manipulations out of my life, and I was determined to maintain it. Zaria reached out slowly over time, and we began a cautious path toward reconciliation. Our conversations were careful, measured, and full of honesty. We shared our feelings, acknowledged past mistakes, and slowly started to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't immediate, but for the first time, I saw a chance for a relationship with my sister that was based on truth, not deception. As for my parents, the strain of the secrets they had built finally took its toll. Unable to survive the consequences of their lies and the fallout with family and extended relatives, they ended up living separately. The carefully constructed facade they had maintained for years had collapsed, leaving them to face the reality they had created. Through it all, I found peace. I had taken back my story. I was no longer defined by their choices or the secrets they had kept. I had the freedom to live fully as myself, guided by the truth and my own sense of worth. I began to build my new future with clarity, independence, and strong boundaries. I focused on education, career goals, and relationships that were built on honesty. I surrounded myself with people who respected me, supported me, and encouraged me to grow. Every day, I felt stronger, more certain, and more in control of my life than I ever had before. Now, I want to leave this message for anyone who has been betrayed, hurt, or misled. The truth is powerful, and choosing yourself is vital. Don't let the lies of others define your life. Face the past, reclaim your story, and build a future rooted in honesty and self-respect. You owe it to yourself to live fully, unapologetically, and authentically. Do you think Amara made the right choice by stepping away from her family and taking control of her own life? Or should she have stayed and tried to fix things sooner? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear your opinion. And if stories like this inspire you, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one.